year I graduated from high school, there was a lot of talk about the end of history. The Soviet Union had collapsed. All was right with the world, at least from a certain point of view. And it seemed clear that nothing interesting would ever happen again. At 18, the idea that history was over and done with really bothered me. I wanted to witness history, maybe even be a part of it. The end of history sounded so very boring. I felt cheated of an adventure. As we mark the end of the year 2020, let me just say, for the record, I was an idiot. Now that we find ourselves again fully immersed in the streams of history, I've been thinking about how God works in and with time, and how God might be working in these times. How often did you wish for the end of 2020? How often have we all wished for a quick fix to everything that's been so hard over the past year? I wish I could snap my fingers and make it all go away. The pandemic, the fear, the division we find everywhere we turn. It's an old, old prayer. How long, O Lord, how long? I wish God would make everything right now. But how many times, in even worse times than these, how many times have people wished for God's immediate intervention, prayed for it? But it seems God doesn't usually work that way. God isn't into quick fixes. The scriptures tell us that the Israelites wandered in the wilderness for 40 years. And that was after generations of slavery in Egypt. Tradition says that they later spent 70 years in exile in Babylon. For all those years they prayed, "How long, O Lord, how long?" And what about Jesus? One famous critique of the Apostles' Creed points out that it reduces the world's greatest life to a comma. Jesus is born, he suffers, he dies. It would be reasonable to read the Creed and conclude that nothing of importance happened between Christmas morning and Good Friday. Everything that mattered took place on a single day, or maybe 3 days. But if there's one core truth of Christmas, one core truth of the Incarnation, it's that Jesus lived a full human life. He was born as a baby. He learned to walk and to talk. He grew older and probably learned a trade. The Gospel of Luke tells us that he was 30 years old when he began his public ministry. To incarnate means to make flesh, and incarnation requires time. Life requires time. Last week in our Christmas pilgrimage and in our service of lessons and carols, we jumped from the angel Gabriel's appearance to Mary directly to the birth of Jesus without any delay. But think about it. Let's put Jesus' story into our current timeline. If Jesus had been born on Christmas Day 2020, Mary's pregnancy would have begun about the time we were all starting to talk about lockdowns and face masks and social distancing. Today, we read about Jesus visiting the temple at the age of 12. If that event had taken place during Passover 2020, Jesus would have been born 12 years earlier, in 2008, about the same time Barack Obama was first elected president. And if Jesus' death and resurrection had taken place in Holy Week of 2020, he would have been born in the late 1980s, while Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev were negotiating a nuclear arms deal and Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister in England. Of course, Jesus was born in his own time and his own place, not in ours. But he was born into time, into history. I love today's gospel passage because it places Jesus clearly in his time and place, and because it makes his humanity so very real. Jesus is 12 years old. He travels to Jerusalem with his family, but when they return home, he stays behind without his parents' knowledge or permission to talk to the teachers in the temple. His parents, of course, are terrified when they can't find him. Jesus in this story is in so many ways a typical 12-year-old, trying to prove himself, pulling away from his parents, testing boundaries, trying to understand who he is. And at the same time, he's anything but typical, a child with the wisdom of a rabbi. I love the story, but I think my favorite bit of it is how it ends. What happens after Jesus' panicked parents find him and take him home to Nazareth? Jesus increased in wisdom and in years, and in divine and human favor. He increased in wisdom and in years, and in divine and human favor. In other words, he grew, he changed, he learned. In this week in which we continue our celebration of Christmas, in this week in which we celebrate the incarnation, the astonishing truth that God is with us, let us remember that God may sometimes work slowly, but let us also remember that God's slow work changes everything. And so I'll wish you a happy new year, and I'll joyfully bid good riddance to the year 2020. But I do so with a prayer and a word of caution. My prayer for us all in this new year is that we, like Jesus, will increase in wisdom and in years, and in divine and human favor. My caution is that we should remember that if that took time for Jesus, it might take a while for us as well. But the promise of Christmas is this: God will be with us in the waiting and in the changing.